IT is about freedom.
This is the toughest market imaginable.
Right now, the best industry for innovators, it's IT.
All you need is just a computer to invent a great variety of things.
IT market, as we said before, is like the air. It's not just an industry, it's a unique environment.
This is one of the most important segments of innovation markets.
Tech is all around us. It crushes all other industries.
Computer systems have truly become a new vector in inventiveness.
If your company is worth $1 billion, it means nothing in the modern world.
The Ukrainian IT industry became a cutting-edge industry. It already is one of the flagship of the Ukrainian economy and an essential part of its international brand. We have powerful outsourcing companies, we have unicorns, promising startups, worldwide brands and innovation parks, even the government in a smartphone. The industry overall has more than 300,000 specialists. And so, of course, what makes any industry is the people. The IT sphere would not be possible without...
All right, about computers. A clip about computers. Let's go.
Let's see, when did this happen exactly?
Well, I guess in school.
Yeah, I think it was back in 1995.
2000 or 2001.
2002, it seems.
The 90s? No, not the 90s.
The year was 1999 and I was 6.
I've had a PC for as long as I can remember.
It was in 7th or 8th grade, I guess in computer science class.
A buddy of mine, my classmate, I went to his house and I saw a color Apple computer.
My mom worked at a district administration, and as far as I know, all government officials started being provided with first computers. And I started using the computer for gaming and listening to music and helping teachers at my school type their lecture notes in order to switch from paper writing to typing.
I wasn't allowed to use it, but that didn't stop me. You know, I learned to type my first commands for launching games.
I remember I was nagging my mother for a month, even for 2. Like, I was pounding my thermometer like this and I told her I was very sick. My mother was very gullible.
I needed to write an essay about ostriches, so I typed and printed it. It was for a biology class or zoology, I can't say for sure.
The first time I wrote a program, it was some small program in Pascal Basic. But I remember clearly how the exact moment my career as a coder died.
It all starts with a computer. Let us tell you a story about how computational technologies first entered Ukraine.
What's fascinating is that the first computer in continental Europe was made in Kyiv by Lebedev. They used to call those electronic computational machines. The edges of the room were covered with tubes. I can't remember how many tubes there were, but there was a lot. You turn it on and the entire room goes heated. You literally had to cool the room down. Lebedev's follower was Viktor Glushkov, who founded the Institute of Cybernetics. That was the leading institute in the field. They developed their own programming languages. It for sure was a foundational point for the first generation of IT specialists. In 1976, on September 1st, I met Professor Glushkov in Kyiv at the Institute of Cybernetics, when he spoke about the future of artificial intelligence.
Whether we want AI to become real or not, whether we would endorse it or oppose it, if society needs it, this task of creating it will be resolved.
At that point, it wasn't even science fiction, just a dream of the very few.
Cybernetics was then condemned by Marxists, Leninists as a pseudoscience. We had quite a few groundbreaking researchers in the field, but because the party couldn't see the cybernetics as the science of the future, our society got far behind the US, the UK, France and other countries.
I entered the university in 1983, and this was the very end of that great era. I was taught by people who grew up in that environment. But instead of tubes, we had semiconductors. That was the time when integral circuits appeared.
We started out by telling you what an integrated circuit is. This is an integrated circuit.
Then came very large-scale integration circuits.
And this rapid advancement of technology was taking place all over the world. There were a lot of talented specialists in Ukraine, but the borders were closed and private entrepreneurship was mostly illegal.
In the US, you had an opportunity to turn your invention into a monetary. A startup company that makes something groundbreaking, so it was a chase for a really cool carrot. So these incentive structures created a strikingly different environment than in Soviet Union.
Our neighboring state had and still has an organization commonly known as the KGB. So that organization could lay its hands on some sample, some specimen of a microchip, and we would reverse engineer it. We made copycats of Intel processors.
The Soviet Union used to have a so-called M-series of processors, but what IBM could pack in a little box, we packed in 3 ones.
We lagged behind everything that was made in the US by at least a year. The next generation was built on the foundation laid in those years.
1991, the year of independence.
When Ukraine became independent, billions of links were broken. Now there were 15 republics having institutes working on very different projects, including IT projects. The projects they worked on were gone. The institutions they were serving were gone forever. They needed to find other sources of income. Some ended up trading on the street markets, others, would create their own oil companies. It depends.
We calculated that society invests about $1 million to raise a big-time IT specialist. That means that trillions of dollars left the Soviet Union. In the 1990s, Ukraine's IT industry was not developed at all. But in fact, at that time, nobody here really knew what IT was about. There was no strong central government, no government monopolies, and no oligarchs. So there was no one to bother us.
First, there were entrepreneurs in Ukraine, then the first IT guys. They were guys who didn't know any better, but were geeks and were good at IT. They did it because they loved it. It wasn't about money back then.
The 90s were an adventurous time.
We didn't think about business then. We were scientists who were excited to make some scientific, technical stuff.
We were engineers. We wanted to be the best in the world in terms of the solutions we were producing.
We wanted to make software to calculate electric networks. I dreamt that I would make enough money to buy an apartment. Unfortunately, the inflation levels were such that where we got to have our money, it was enough to buy a new door, maybe.
SoftServe was founded back in 1993 as a business school. One of its main patrons was a former vice president of General Electric, which was one of the world's biggest companies at that time. He wanted to help Ukraine grow. And when he saw that we had a business plan, he aided SoftServe with the first contracts. For General Electric, of course. Just 3 months after we visited the business school, we already had our first real orders. And we completed them immediately, and that propelled us to our next projects.
We managed to gather our first team from winners of math competitions, which means there were no people with IQs less than 140. I still think I was the dumbest one. Then there was a crisis which started in Russia and then penetrated our market. Clients refused to pay. It turned out we have zero financial backups, but we needed to get through somehow. We realized that we want to grow.
In the 1990s, it was hard to reach clients. The internet was a novelty, and the connections we had were nothing like we have nowadays.
So we just started spamming letters. Hey, do you want to work with us?
Cisco, IBM, Panasonic,
In Quantum of Solace, there's the scene where James Bond falls along with the villain. That scene was done with our equipment, and the first few Spider-Man movies,
Cloudera, Deutsche Bank.
Cirque du Soleil, movie series, Adrenaline,
We worked with Microsoft, Hewlett-Packard,
Tokyo Olympics.
with Dell. I can go on for a whole day, no?
We also started doing business in the field we were educated for. Then we developed into several major companies in Ukraine. First of all, it was Quasar Micro. There is body, there is mind, and there's soul. We're talking about the body. That's hardware. The first computer in Ukraine was made by us. We called it Champion. First for domestic market, and then for export. There was plenty of room for growth, and many people got into it.
It was rare for Ukrainian companies to afford to even purchase computers.
At the beginning, they were very expensive, like a couple of $1,000s, while the average salary in the country was between $30 to $50 per month. In a group of friends, only one or two guys had computers, and that was the norm.
Oh, come on. Only 1 in 100 had a computer.
Got a computer, Pentium 3450. The motherboard is P3BM, and the hard drive is 27 gigabytes.
We kept trying. We made our own production, our own development, made our own motherboards, and software too.
The gear got cheaper, and it was more accessible.
And that meant that the computer came to every family.
It was the early 2000s, the new millennium. Ukraine was independent, was at the time when personal computers start to become more or less affordable for every family. Ukraine officially entered the age of technology and started exploring yet unknown opportunities that came with it.
I clicked every single button there was to click on my computer, and then I discovered Quake. So I started playing Quake.
It seems almost comical now, doesn't it? Pixel graphics, all of it. But then it was the coolest thing ever, simply because it had 3D.
The Sims.
If you will now tell me you've never played Heroes 3, then I don't even know why we're having this interview.
Half-Life, I guess. But usually I played not at home, but in computer clubs.
Those clubs sprung up like mushrooms. Those were the places where the first real comradeships emerged. Some true, real friendships. All in those computer clubs.
You walk into computer club, you smell the overheated motherboards, the greasy desks. They hardly aired out the place. It was dark. It was like a ritual.
It was crowded mostly by the guys. They sat there and gamed all day.
By the way, I met my first love in the computer club.
The games that we saw at computer clubs, they were just incredible. I went to a computer club to play
Counter-Strike.
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 Sometimes we played at nighttime because the prices were the lowest then.
My parents didn't allow me to play at night. So I played late in the evenings, after classes or on weekends.
I played a lot of Lineage when I was at school. But a year before graduating, I realized I need to have some order in my life. So I sold all my things for $1,000. I felt stupid rich after that. These are some really odd questions for an interview, to be honest. But yeah, I remember it really well. All those childhood impressions, they could really be the reason why I entered this market.
You must understand that Ukrainian computer clubs were foundational for global cybersports. Dota 2, the Counter-Strike, all these scenes grew up from computer clubs in one way or another.
Ukrainian teenagers were spending their time in what was known as computer clubs, and they bred a subculture that grew into the contemporary Ukrainian cybersports scene. Ukrainian teams are leaders in Dota and Counter-Strike, but that's a whole other story. Let's get back to those who didn't become cybersports stars, but IT entrepreneurs instead.
The cave IT guys, of course, they practically lived at the Petrivka market.
Okay, Petrivka. Petrivka was a big deal in 2000s. It was phenomenal. It was a market based in Kiev where everybody would come to get some software or some games or anything computer related.
Pirated products, they gave us total access to any imaginable product that you could think of in the entire IT market.
In Ukraine in the 90s or even in the early 2000s, people could not afford to pay $10, let alone thousands of dollars for complicated software like 3D Max or AutoCAD. But when they laid their hands on this software, legally or not, they created real value for the whole world. And then 10 years later, some of those same people are working in really big companies, making their sales grow. And the companies others have founded make big contracts to purchase expensive software.
We shall not say good words about Petrivka, of course. It was the market where pirates operated. Petrivka is one of those things for which good people in the West will definitely...
The respect we now have for intellectual property started to emerge within our generation. We learned to appreciate the products each company in our market makes, be it Ukrainian or global.
Another iconic spot in Kiev was Kardachi, or Karavayevi Dachas.
It had less software and more hardware. Kardachi used to feature all possible electronics. If you had to build a custom PC, or if you had to have a repair of any level of complexity, it was the best place to go.
There's this mythical vibe, the place that lives its own unique life. Whether you're a publisher, a student, or a professional, it doesn't matter. I would compare it to a unique local fast food. It may be junky, but it's beloved by everyone and everyone must try it.
I was constantly asked questions. I have trouble running something, that this thing is broken, I have no driver for that, I didn't know which software to use, I didn't know where to find the answers. And then my friend all of a sudden became an expert in everything. I asked, how do you have all the answers so fast? He goes, I have internet.
The Internet is a vast network that allows computers around the world to communicate and share information.
The first question was, how do you plug it in?
In 1990s, there were dial-up modems.
It was some kind of a modem that should call some provider by telephone.
With cards, you use dial-up, you better pick a time, you better use it at night.
At some flea market, I found some board, figured out how it worked and connected it to a computer. Then I linked it to the landline.
Like your typical old phone with a handset.
So I connected to that phone. If your neighbors are talking over the phone, your web connection is down. If the wind is blowing outside, your web connection is down. You had to summon the connection like a shaman, with a ritual dance or something like that. You had to push buttons, there were passwords, logins, and then there was this internet sound.
If you tried to open 15 tabs simultaneously, it would take like 10-15 minutes to load. You had to be wise about what websites you want to visit.
It was one hell of a quest. But the need to connect with the world outside was stronger than all the barriers on the road. The internet gave us access to information, an unlimited pool of information.
All the technologies that emerged on the market later were internet-based.
Then there were all kinds of chats and forums.
Galanet, bizarre.
It was like a thread with no end and many messages. It was impossible to read them all. It was like a socializing platform.
And of course, everyone had ICQ.
ICQ was a groundbreaking app.
You started to message your classmates in your little town. But then, all of a sudden, you had the means to speak with people in large cities, in distant countries. That was overwhelming. It produced the wow effect.
We know that most science fiction writers predicted the rise of computers, but there was no single writer who predicted social media.
Social media was a breakthrough, an invention for people to communicate. We all use social media now. The next step was probably mobile technology.
Steve Jobs introduced iPhone, and this changed everything entirely.
A phone. Are you getting it? And we are calling it iPhone.
Nobody expected this gadget to be so cool, to give thousands of jobs, even millions of programmers, to build careers on coding, creating startups, new companies in this new ecosystem.
The massive device called PC all of a sudden became small and portable. Now it is a smartphone.
Since then, societal growth accelerated massively, because if in your pocket there is access to all the information in the world, a quick way to communicate, to solve any problem, including those related to business or to the working environment, it gives an enormous push to societal progress.
Technologies we have now all stand on the shoulders of inventors of all PCs. The internet, smartphones, the social media have all created an environment that now penetrates the whole world and became a multi-billion business market. And Ukraine, of course, is an important player in it.
The 1990s and the early 2000s was the time when Ukrainians developed an ecosystem to build service or outsource companies.
It was a really important milestone. This market created a new social class of developers, coders, tech specialists, and designers.
Ukrainians made software for others. And then the coolest engineers started connecting with the coolest founders, and thus some coolest product companies were made.
What is the rate of this as relates to that? Guess nobody ever tried to estimate.
70 to 30, something like that.
But then there's a question. Where are Ukrainian? Facebook, Uber, Microsoft, and the list goes on.
It's a good question.
And our companies started coming up later. Now there are more and more of them.
Not to forget anyone. Give me a second. I like Ajax very much.
When I think about my favorite Ukrainian entrepreneurs, I always think of Alexander Konotopsky, the one who created Ajax.
Let's be honest. Hardware, it's a really tough business. And the fact that they have this kind of scale of manufacturing business in Ukraine is really impressive.
Ajax is a home security system. It features all sorts of sensors, motion sensors, broken glass sensors, flood sensors, and smoke and heat sensors. It's needed to protect people from home invasions, fires and floods. It controls everything that goes on in your home by smartphone.
This is like, wow. Few people get how challenging it is to develop a product like this. It's basically like creating a new iPhone.
Ajax grew from a very particular problem that I used to have.
A startup created for one person can cater to millions. Startups that are created for millions end up catering to nobody.
We sold security systems. We bought them in China and then shipped and sold them in Ukraine. The quality was so we decided to develop our own systems. We employed a bunch of students, and so Ajax was born.
Their big production is located in Ukraine. They hire engineers and other experts to develop the whole thing.
For today, Ajax is the biggest security systems producer in Europe. We strive to be the biggest in the world. Big ideas, lots of plans.
Konotopsky and his team are simply the best.
We're friends with Sasha Kosovan, the founder of MacPo. I hope you'll invite him also. He's an icon in Ukrainian IT.
All that we use, everything, the machines, objects, all of them can use some service to prolong their life, to work as intended for longer. Clean Mac is this kind of service, but for your desktop or for your Mac. Your Mac is as good as new. You know, when our company started, we didn't have any financial expectations whatsoever. I made a product because I wanted to make something that was useful for people. The amount of people that downloaded our product is probably close to 300 million, if not more.
This was Alexander Neskin's idea. He had a dog named Rocky. That dog barked a lot every time when Alexander wasn't at home. His neighbors complained a lot. This became a problem that needed some serious solution. So, Alexander thought that he could take a camera and attach a laser pointer to it in order to watch the dog remotely, and he could move the laser pointer to play with the dog. And this came as a solution to a particular person's problem. 3 guys from Kiev introduce a camera with a laser to play with cats and dogs when you're not at home. The news reported it as if it was an April Fool's joke. But it worked. And some media even issued a correction. No, it isn't an April Fool's joke. It's a real company and a real product for pet owners who want to interact with their pets. And we saw thousands of people visiting our website, leaving their emails saying, let us know when the product will be available for purchase.
You can turn a super crazy idea into a super product. The most insane idea can be sold as long as you know how to sell it correctly.
There's a wonderful Ukrainian company called Reface.
Feel it, Harry? It's our big chance, man.
They raised money from one of the coolest funds in the US, from Silicon Valley. They worked on this project.
Yarek and Olis, they're my co-founders at Reface.
We've worked together since 2011. Face Swap was a story we all believed in, as a team.
I think everybody in the world knows them by now.
Reface, I think, as an app, skyrocketed in the entertainment market. We were the first in the world who implemented this innovative technology, a visual face modification, and we gave it to the masses.
Behind this product, of course, is a technology that is very complex, very powerful, and very cool.
Their generative technology specifically were a rarity in the market then. I mean, for something to be generated in real time and to look good. In our case, it was an image generation overlaid on an image.
And the next step in this kind of technology, it's up to our guys from Kiev to make it.
Today, FaceSwap's been downloaded more than 200 million times.
The Ukrainian IT sector grows at an enormous pace. It already gave the world several unicorn companies, startups the values of which pass $1 billion threshold.
Every company dreams of becoming a unicorn.
Unicorns are companies evaluated for more than $1 billion.
For sure, we have to mention something about Preply. They make international educational software for any foreign language online.
Grammarly is a super successful company.
It helps millions of people around the world to write in English correctly. And it was also found by Ukrainians.
It went public on GitLab and now it's worth $15 billion.
They create software for programmers to help programmers to organize their code and improve their code efficiency.
The Riddle team from Odessa reached hundreds of millions of users.
Moreover, Ukraine has IT companies that created super successful business models. You can find Ukrainian brands making your daily life easier in areas of life you would least expect.
People AI, these are success stories.
I can recall Awesemic, a platform for designers.
Better Me is an app for fitness and diet downloaded by over 100 millions of users around the globe. DressX allows people to try on clothes virtually and purchase it online.
Bird is a Ukrainian startup, but I know it now enters foreign markets.
Respeecher. If we at Reface make a face swap, they do a voice swap. A user can speak in other people's voices.
And I'm business development executive here in Respeecher, and now I'd like to show you some Respeecher magic.
Aeroslate, Tarosoft, Intellis, and X.
The robots are already here, folks. Never mind Amazon. Robots are working at the warehouses of Ukrainian companies like Nova Poshta and Rosetka.
We have Monobank, we have Private24. These banking apps are extremely useful and beloved among Ukrainians.
Every day we see incredible progress of digital technologies. We have apps and infrastructures people in the West or the Pacific East often miss. So we do not just catch up. In many aspects, we lead.
Many entrepreneurs speak out publicly about all the problems they face along the way. The company had died like 10 times already. I mean, we thought it was on the brink of death.
A lot of people around us, they said that face swapping, it just makes no sense. On some rare occasions, when nobody around me mentioned that face swapping makes no sense, I was at the end of the day saying, hey, something's wrong. It's like nobody said anything bad about us.
The first 7 years are something I wouldn't like to live through again. It was hard, mistakes were made. There were clients we tried to contact for 3 years in a row. We called them and said, "We're Ajax," and they answered, "Go f*** yourself," and it's just the quote.
Our story, when it comes to Reface, is a story of banging heads against the wall. And it seems like after 9 years of banging, we hollowed out the door for ourselves. I guess it's a kind of good success advice. Never give up, go all the way to the end, especially if you believe in what you're doing and if you're surrounded by people that you believe in. I'm very grateful to my partners, Yarek and Olis. They know everything. I really thank them. Thanks to Denis, Kirilo, Serhiy Tokarev. Thanks to Vanya Altsibeyev, Dima Shvets, Serhiy, our early investor. It seems to me we together built this spaceship, and that's very cool.
IT in Ukraine is synonymous with high earnings, since this seems to be the most evident sign of the company's success. It's true that IT, like any business, runs on money, but the financial incentive is not the only thing that gets the IT market going.
The point idea is not to make enough money to buy yachts, planes, and all those other neat things. The main point is to have enough energy and motivation to make a useful contribution to the world around us.
People like to brag. Yeah, we raised $5 million, but what it means is that they have an idea, and others believed in its potential enough to invest in them.
People in IT typically find it awkward to dress rich or drive expensive cars and so on. I believe that it's because of some mixture of intelligence, enthusiasm, optimism, and a lack of resentment.
Why do we love Lionel Messi? Because he earns 100 million? Or because he's a genius on the football field? The same goes for the IT market. We love our industry because it generates cutting-edge ideas. And we are geniuses on the field, am I right? Of course, to play football that well, you gotta have money. That's for sure. But if you look at the volume of finance invested in this industry, it's quite big. So financing is sufficient. That's why we have to focus on the ideas. Great ideas always get funded.
Kitsme is totally wild. I respect him a lot.
Humanity used to develop our physical environment. It did so for thousands of years. Now it crafts a new virtual environment, and that's a lot of effort. We need as many builders as possible to develop it decently.
The demand for coders and for developers is very much higher than the supply that exists in Ukraine currently.
Ukraine, de facto, needs 40 to 50,000 employees a year. And how much IT education generates?
That's a very good question.
20,000. Where do they come from? First of all, the government education, undergraduates and masters, plus private universities, undergraduates and masters, and then the corporate universities. And then there are courses and training groups. Nowadays, there are like 4,000 IT educational events per year in Ukraine.
IT is like the air we breathe. It's not only about education and then labor. It is about the ecosystem that fosters talent. The hubs, the accelerators, the co-working spaces and the investment vehicles. And the one place in Ukraine that gathered all of this is
Unit City, it's an innovation park. They combine IT culture into one huge infrastructure. The companies join and then they grow.
The contemporary world is all about networks where smart people meet and have conversation. It can be in a cafeteria and right on the street, and it's like, okay, I'm involved in this and that. And what are you working on? Let's meet later and work on something new together. Companies are worth hundreds of millions can be born in a random conversation. So that's the place to network, a place where young people can meet and grow. And I'll be so glad if they wouldn't go abroad, but just achieved success here in Ukraine. My dream is to create a competitor not only to Silicon Valley, but to entire Europe and all the countries.
Unit, in this case, became a very cool playground for the local IT market.
We propose a variety of services. We have a startup foundry, a cafe, a restaurant, lecture halls and institutes, co-working spaces, accelerators, apartments, and offices. It's a city inside a city.
They engage many IT mentors, propose programs, and attract foreign investors for their investment or support. And in this case, that's a major value. The place itself is nice, it looks respectable, and it's transparent and understandable. And that's also a huge advantage.
So, Ukraine has some wonderful examples of private enterprises. And typically, it's private enterprises that fill the gap in services that the government fails to provide. But we have some good news for you too.
Even today, in our departments, we still use paper, not digits.
Have you ever wanted to go to administrative office to solve your problem? That's insane. A bureaucrat gets paid from your taxes and then treats you as if you owe him something. I get irritated just by thinking about it.
So, the Ministry of Digital Transformation is actively closing this gap now.
In Ukraine, we created a neat service that adds comfort to people's life.
Our goal is to make it possible to order and receive any government service in Ukraine in a few clicks on one's smartphone. Dia is a smartphone app and a platform where you can receive any government service in a few clicks.
This is a tool. This is an app that drastically revolutionized our lives.
You can register your business in like 10 minutes. You can show and verify your ID, your driving license, your identification number, all on your phone.
I can see if I have been fined.
I would be so glad if DIA existed when I was registering my first company. This alone would resolve a million questions.
In the US, an app like this is impossible even to imagine. It's so efficient. I'm still waiting for my bank to send me a checkbook. A physical book. A checkbook. Like, what is this? What am I supposed to do with it?
Apple enters the electronic documents market. They recently launched the pilot program for electronic driving licenses in a couple of states, while we already have it in place. Even in legislation, there's driving license, birth certificate, ID card, and other documents. We do not simply conceive it as an idea. We've implemented it both legislatively and technologically. And what's key, and we recently discussed it with Tim Cook, we made it part of everyday life.
What holds me back from saying it's perfect? Well, let's be honest, radio broadcasting in DIA is something the app could perfectly do without.
People have this expectation that everything government touches turns to shit, but in this case, it's a great idea.
Something that's innate for Ukrainians is to criticize whatever the government does. And that's good. It's great that we live in a country where you can criticize the government freely.
This is a matter of trust. Brands nowadays seems much more trustworthy than governments. That's why governments should not force people to use their innovations, but give them an alternative instead. Thus building the same level of trust people today have in brands like Telegram, Facebook, Instagram, Google, and other tech giants.
From the medieval stage of computer technology, we leapt into the spaces no other society entered before. I never expected such a thing to happen.
For example, this year we prevented more than 3 billion hryvnias worth of corrupt tender purchases in the IT sector alone. And such examples are numerous in all sectors of the economy.
And we need to appreciate when people make bold choices and achieve great results, even if these are the people who work in the government.
Stand in line.
People always had hope for a better future, and IT is the place where that future is created. In a span of a few decades, we fostered a unique IT environment. It now has room for enormous outsourcing companies, innovative startups, and digital products aimed to solve a wide range of problems, making people's life more comfortable. Every year, we have a few more new unicorns that attract billions of investments. We stand on the brink of a new age of discoveries that will change human lives for the better. And Ukraine is ready to play its part. Ukrainian IT is about honesty and dignity, and it is ready to champion these values all around the world. No matter what IT company or job opening you choose, what is most important is that you join the team of talents that together create one of the world's most promising brands. The brand of Ukraine.
I guess that here in Ukraine, we have all the opportunities to make a truly awesome tech hub. And we're already almost there. We just need to invest a little bit more time and effort.
Sometimes we underappreciate what our country is. It seems to us that Ukraine is a third world country when in reality,
Ukraine, Kiev, and a couple of other cities in Ukraine are phenomenal places, not only by Ukrainian, but by global standards.
If you ask me, how many of those who left your company emigrated abroad?
That's a really interesting question.
I'd say, I don't know. I went to EPAM and asked them about their statistics concerning that. And they say, we don't count. Why not? Because those are isolated cases. It's like, why count them? What's the point?
Ukraine has a lot of talented, creative people, and these people are relatively kind. I mean, I think Ukrainians are good and kind. They generally want to live in peace with other people. They wish others good and pleasant things to live in a good and pleasant society.
There's this truly fantastic level of creative energy here, and it manifests itself constantly. I mean, in the last 30 years, there were practically 3 creative revolutions in this country. The Revolution on Granite, the Orange Revolution, and the Revolution of Dignity. These were not food riots or something. These were revolutions made by people who demanded more freedom.
And freedom is probably the key word here. Our biggest advantage, when you do feel that you are really free to achieve whatever you want.
We see signs of this creativity everywhere, in Ukrainian music, cafe, restaurants.
The boldest science fiction writers could not have predicted the life we live now. We already live in what was only written about since the time of Jules Verne.
People who work in technology area have a disproportional influence on the future of the world.
Thing is, the IT does not stand for information technologies only. It stands for the environment we build, the air we breathe.
Today, in Ukraine, we generate ideas that will be relevant throughout the 21st century in Europe and across the entire globe. And it's amazing to be a part of it.
As a way of finishing, I want to bring a quote by Alexei Ivanovich, with whom we met on a vacation this year. I said to him one day, "Hey Dad, you code 8 hours a day even on vacation. Can you just stop for at least one day?" But he's 82 years old and he still codes in C++. It's his life. There is no work-life division here. It's a fascinating way of life. I want young people to see my father as a role model. You can be 82 and be fascinated by coding. Your life can be extremely exciting. I get afraid when I hear from young people their lives are boring. They say, "I have no interests. I'm so bored." It's awful. I want them to be like my dad, to be fascinated with one's job at the age of 82. He is a role model for me too. I want to live to 80 and still discover, create and experiment.
Today, Russia attacked the entire territory of our country.
If the times get tough, we just unite. Ukraine officially declares the creation of cyber forces.
More than 250,000 volunteers answered the call and joined the so-called IT army.
Cyber attacks take place every second.
This is that precise point where you must do everything you possibly can.
Ukrainian cyber forces hacked the Kremlin.
The digital blockade of Russia is ongoing.
Many people right now, they've revised their pacifist views.
We have united dozens of teams.
Modern warfare is not about the number of soldiers, it's about innovations.
And we can conceptualize every modern aircraft as a computer that is connected to a network. Even these devices widely feature cyber technologies.
In some sense, it's a drone war.
That's why our Ministry of Digital Technology has a drone army.
IT specialists joined the ranks of cyber forces and successfully fight on the digital front.
More and more military startups emerge in Ukraine every single day.
Interesting times are ahead of us.